Thank you all for being here very much. I was so happy to come this year. I'm actually happy to come every year, but in particular this year because Keshava Maharaj is going to be here. And there is just an incredible lineup of speakers. And I'm like, what am I doing here? I'm not one of these big philosophical people. And I actually avoid chanting Sanskrit slokas because I'm always in the middle of a class because I'm always afraid I'll forget them. So better I just don't chant them. You know? And there's been these just wonderful presentations that are both very deeply philosophical as well as deeply practical. How to apply the philosophy is very important. So my topic for this presentation is women and ISKCON. And we'll see how that goes with you. So, Srila Prabhupada repeatedly requested all of his followers to regularly read his books. And since most of us, his followers, are conditioned souls, we may bring our conditioning into our reading, and as a result, not always have a balanced understanding. We can look at some of the ways his teachings can be understood and some reasons why such misunderstandings may occur. And I give credit to Shakadasi, TP at the Bhaktivedanta Matter, your TP. Just a few days ago, there was Vishaka Devi Dasi meeting and greeting the King of England, Mr. Charles, who had just recently been in America. But we share a kindred spirit in terms of wanting to see everyone engaged in Prabhupada's service and helping him push on this mission. And that includes the ladies. So this year, earlier this year, following the AGM annual general meeting of the GBC, many devotees were surprised and even hurt by a particularly abrupt decision from the GBC, which had potentially grave impacts on the lady devotees. Though there were many quotes coming from both sides, and the interpretation which would appear to support one side, their understanding, while often appearing to be conflicting with the other side. And at the heart of it, for most of the ladies in ISKCON, was an unhidden attempt to thwart Srila Prabhupada's very instructions and his examples. In other words, to speak plain English, the ladies would be taken as inferior and no longer eligible for a wide range of services, particularly Brahminical services, our administrative service among the forefront. And our experiences with Srila Prabhupada as his spiritual daughters were without hindrance from him. And it's especially painful, difficult to hear these things. Srila Prabhupada was very broad-minded and generous in how he approached different situations. And he didn't give ultimatums that would be a source of division or barriers to our practice in bhakti in the female body. He avoided black and white situations. You know, the fact is kids don't like to sit and hear philosophical lectures and this and that, you know. And there's a wonderful situation made for them, so that it's not like we don't want kids here. We want kids in the right place so that they're comfortable and everyone else is comfortable, because when the kid's not comfortable, as you heard, they're going to let us know. And then the parents, usually the mother, will start trying to like stop the kid from making noise, so then you have the kid and the parent, and you can't concentrate, you know. Srila Prabhupada was fine with kids, but when they opened their mouth, remove the child. You can hear it on many tapes, you know. So he avoided black and white situations, although his students were often not capable of expanding what they would see in narrow dimensions. So this Hare Krishna movement has been around for 60 years, and we're still sorting out major aspects of our culture. And a number of factors contributed to the dissension perpetually swirling around this topic, you know, the men, the women, you know, it just when you think, okay, Shanti, Shanti, it's all taken care of, you know, something else pops up. So the male and female psychological tendencies are there. This is one reason. Men tend to, and this is being said as just an observation, a statement. It's not with a condemnation or trying to, you know, put somebody down. But men tend to feel superior to women, and women tend to defer to men. When we came to Srila Prabhupada's movement, we brought with us different cultural, societal, familial, and personal expectations about what men and women can or cannot do, or what we should or should not do. You know, we brought that baggage with us. And we may mistake some past and present values and customs of traditional India as Vaisnava values taught by Srila Prabhupada. The sexual attraction between men and women, you know, the butter, the fire, it's in the current climate often overlooked or minimized at our peril. So the result of women being chaste as in the term behavior of good character, not chaste as in somebody's running after you. So the result of women being chaste and supportive of her husband is that they gain great power. Ravana, he was defeated by Sita's curse. Gandhari, Kunti, Devahuti, they were illustrious, powerful women, all of them very chaste. Srila Prabhupada writes, Gandhari, although a woman, is no less than Bhishma Deva in character. Krishna clearly says that women are eligible for the highest destination. We get from Gita 32, 932. And Srila Prabhupada confirmed, Draupadi attained the same destination as her exalted husbands. And in the end, when they all went north, she had to fend for herself. Nobody was picking up her bags or offering an arm or carrying her. She was on her own, which is as it should be at the time of departure. In Vaishnavism, qualification is not based on the body, but on an individual consciousness. The wives of the degraded Kaliya serpent were actually very serious devotees of Lord Krishna. And according to the acharyas, they often tried to convince their husband to surrender to Krishna, but he wasn't having it. And finally, finding himself in unbearable agony, Krishna dancing on his many heads, Kaliya remembered his wife's advice and he finally took shelter of the Lord. This you can find in the purport 10:16:30. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explained that Kaliya's wives were great devotees of Krishna. And actually, they'd been disgusted by their husband's behavior because of his demoniac activities. So they had been thinking, let this atheist be killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then we'll be widows and we can just worship Krishna. A very unique prayer. But after Krishna danced on Kaliya's hoods, the wives understood Kaliya had taken shelter of the Lord within his mind, and he became humble and he became remorseful. So then they thought, now our husband is becoming a Vaishnava. We must protect him. And even though Krishna had killed many other demons, he spared Kaliya, because Kaliya's wives were great devotees of the Lord, and they were offering him loving affection. Krishna withdrew both Kaliya's offenses against the Lord's devotee Garuda and against the residents of Vrindavan, who were so dear to Krishna. This again is from purport in 10:16:64. So this is the power of the Nagapatni Vaishnavis. So how did Srila Prabhupada translate service opportunities for women? Srila Prabhupada transplanted an entire culture from one age and one millennium to a different age and a different environment. While he left the message of that culture intact, he also had to make the application of that culture practical and appealing to young people who had no orientation or experience with that culture, and for the most part had rejected the cultural values of their own society, wherever it might have been. In the beginning, of course, it was in America, and then UK, and then was spreading. So many had become accustomed to intoxication and promiscuity. And although shockingly contrary to the mood of the day, from the very beginning, Srila Prabhupada encouraged us to get married and become responsible. Coming from the hippie background, I call it the hippie sampradaya, we just did not see any need of marriage. It was like, who needs that, you know? But when Srila Prabhupada was giving what to speak of the other principles, no intoxication, the meat eating, that was fine, no gambling. Actually, the meeting, at that point, vegetarianism, especially in USA, was not something understood or accepted or much practiced. And actually, people looked upon being a vegetarian almost like you were a communist. They saw it as subversive, you know. But when Prabhupada introduced us to Krishna Prasadam, which inherently is vegetarian, we happily embraced that. Also, people came with their own ideas of what they thought it meant to have something to do with India. So like when we were getting our little storefront ready for opening in San Francisco, one of the first things we would do in those days, you'd find a storefront and you'd paint it white. I mean, it was just a practical thing because usually they were kind of grubby looking. So you paint it white. And we were doing that, and some young fellow popped his head inside and, "What you doing?" So, "We're making a temple." And he said, "Oh, I just came back from India and I'm an artist." And he noticed the walls were all bare. I'll paint you a picture." So sometime later he came back. It was quite a big picture actually. And lo and behold, there was Vishnu. Now, I had learned about Vishnu from the cover of the Bhagavatam. Blue skin, 4 arms, a plant growing out of his belly with a flower on top with a fellow with 5 heads on it. Okay, Vishnu. But this fellow, he took artistic license. Learning from Sampradaya, learning Guru Parampara was not yet something in general understood, especially with free-thinking young people. So he had Vishnu, there he was, coming out of an exploding volcano. And we didn't really know any better ourselves, so, well, we put it right on the wall behind the Vyasa sign, which we called Dayas because we didn't know that word, Vyasa sign. So there was Prabhupada's sitting place, and right behind him was Vishnu coming out of a volcano. And Shamsundar had been in Morocco, and he had brought back a Muslim prayer mat. So we didn't see any problem with that. It was, after all, for praying. So that was also there. So we didn't have an overwhelming amount of knowledge in how to apply it in terms of the spiritual culture of becoming a Vaishnava. So there are some uncomfortable and controversial statements about women that we sometimes find in scriptural verses, in Prabhupada's writings, even in speaking. I mentioned this yesterday. For example, Srila Prabhupada writes, which we have just discussed, how a man's psychology and women's psychology are different, as constituted by bodily frame. A man always wants to be superior to his wife, and a wife, as bodily constituted, is naturally inferior to her husband. And thus, the natural instinct is that the husband wants to pose himself as superior to the wife. Now this is a verse, 3:23:2, and I'm reading from the purport. So the man always wants to pose himself as superior to the wife, and this must be observed. Now, somehow when we would read these statements, somehow or other, due to our affectionate connection with Srila Prabhupada and how he so wonderfully treated us, we weren't put off. Somehow it just kind of flew over our head. And there wasn't any kind of pushback from us. Or if there was, Prabhupada would answer in such an eloquent way that everything was resolved. Nowadays, it's frankly more difficult. Men and women do have different psychologies. And to ignore or defy or try to correct these natural psychological bents can make relationships very difficult. And as a result, such statements are actually helpful, not just for husband-wife relationships, but for any relationship between male and female. There was an example that was in an article published in the New York Times in 2017. So Angela Merkel, she was the chancellor, the top leader in Germany. And she spent her political career downplaying her gender. She totally shunned the feminist label. And she did that by honoring the male-female psychology. It was said sometimes her leadership was also often invisible because she built consensus behind the scene and avoided taking credit for ideas that she originated. So she would have some plan, some idea, and she'd insert that into the mind of the men who were her, literally under her, but knowing their psychology, she did it in a way that they took the credit. So whatever had to be done was done, and that was more important to her than, being the one who originated the idea. And that won't work with everybody. Like, there's a very overbearing, overconfident person in charge of America right now, and I can't imagine this working on him. Another touchy statement of Srila Prabhupada's writings: every person must get married. Every woman especially must get married. This is from the CC, Majalila, 7:128, from the purport. So then we can flip the page. from a conversation in Washington, D.C., 76. So Prabhupada said, if one can remain without marriage, now I say everybody must get married, especially the women, but if one can remain without marriage, that is first class. And in that statement, he was referring to brahmacharis. So then Rupanuga, who was the president, he asked, women also? And they were expecting him to, no, they must be married. And so he's saying, women also? They can live without marriage? And Prabhupada said, women also. What is the use of this material husband? Make Krishna your husband. Krishna is prepared to become everything. Love him as a husband, love him as a son, love him as a friend. So it almost appeared to be a contradiction of his own statements. But when you actually look at how Prabhupada operated, his idea was we become Krishna conscious. Not that we become married or not married. And throughout his writings and talks, he leaves room for individuality in how we can achieve Krishna consciousness. Another statement, this was Bombay, January 77, so you know 77 was the year Srila Prabhupada left us. If one becomes Krishna conscious, then she doesn't require a husband. She knows Krishna is my protector. Why shall I artificially seek after a husband or a father or husband? What protection for a few days either the father or the son or the husband can give? Real protection is Krishna. So that's a wonderful admonishment and a beautiful thing to keep in your mind. Real protection is Krishna. He gave Nandalal, a god's sister, a small silver Krishna. This was in Vrindavan, a small silver Krishna, and told her, make him your husband. And she did that. She was kind of a very incredible Vaisnavi, somebody who deserves a whole class. But anyway, she followed Prabhupada's instruction. So there are many practical examples in our movement of women who are not protected by a father, a husband, or a son. Myself, Muktia, temple president of ISKCON Alachua, Kaishori, foremost sought-after editor among devotee authors, Prashanta, director and chief developer of the VIHE in Vrindavan, Vishaka Priya, what an incredible person. She single-handedly, without any male supervisor, got Kirtan Ashram built for the ladies on Parikrama Marg in Vrindavan. She didn't speak Hindi. She'd never had any training, any experience at all in building anything. But her Guru Maharaj, Giriraj Swami, wanted this done, and he was providing the means financially that it would get done. But just having money doesn't mean it's going to work when you have to deal with all these people who, when they will look at a white person, are thinking, yeah, how can I get some more out of them, Especially a rather not huge white lady from South Africa. And she somehow or other, by her pure desire to serve, accomplished this beautiful ashram, Kirtan Ashram, is for ISKCON ladies on the Parikrama Marg. So then, another lady, Shilavati Devi Dasi, she came to the movement at a time when most of us were under 30. And she was 35. She was walking in the streets of the Haight-Ashbury, and she saw Vishnu John Swami. Now, at the time, he wasn't a Swami, but he was such a charismatic person. He was always chanting. Even if there wasn't a Harinam party, he would be chanting. So she saw him, she heard the chanting, and she goes up to him and what is this? Can you tell me, what is this? And he goes, I can take you where you belong. And he took her to the temple. And we're all thinking, what does this old lady want? She's like 35 years old. We're like, what does this old lady want? But Srila Prabhupada personally trained her in the art of deity worship. There's a few pictures about that. And she has some concern, and so there's a letter that he wrote to her. The actual system is that the husband is spiritual master to the wife. But if the wife can bring her husband into practicing this process, then it is all right that the husband accept the wife as a spiritual master. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said that anyone who knows the science of Krishna, that person should be accepted as spiritual master, regardless of any material so-called qualifications, such as rich or poor, man or woman, or Brahmin or Sudra. So this letter was written in June of '69. And she spent her last days in New Vrindavan and passed. She was like 90. She made it to 90 when she departed. The Brahmana husbands had noted their wives, having perfected their transcendental attachment for Krishna, had not one trace of attachment for home, husband, children, and so forth. And from that day on, the husbands accepted these women, their wives, as their worshipable spiritual masters, and no longer thought of them as their wives. So clearly the scriptures, like Krishna, direct us past bodily designations to the essence of each individual, to his or her bhakti. Prabhupada, some more examples in this case. Srila Prabhupada authorized Saradiya to give the Gayatri mantra to her husband, Vaikuntanath. She was with us when we came to Montreal on our way to England. And she was very young. And she'd already been initiated, but we were getting Gayatri, so she also got Gayatri. And then but she had a choice. She could come with us to England, or she could stay in Boston and learn painting from Jadharani. So she chose to stay in Boston, not for learning painting so much. While in Montreal, this devotee who was kind of like a modern-day Narada Muni, he would always show up where Prabhupada was, somehow or other. He had no money, didn't have rich parents. He'd just go to the airport, empty pocket, and he would approach people. I have to go see my father or my grandfather, and I don't have enough money. Can you get? And then he'd get the money, and then he'd go buy a ticket, and whoops, there he was in Montreal. So Cupid shot an arrow, and Saradiya kind of was the receiver of that arrow. So she went to Prabhupada, and she didn't ask to marry him. She just mentioned his name, and Prabhupada said, "So you want to marry Vaikuntanath?" Yes, I'll speak to him. So there is a famous picture in Boston. Vaikuntanath and Saradiya are getting married, Rukmini and Bhardwaj are getting married, and I think it was Nandakishore and his wife getting married. Famous picture. And Prabhupada is doing the yajna. And Srila Prabhupada authorized Chandravali to begin the ladies' ashram in San Francisco. At that point, there wasn't anything like that anywhere. And men had the basement of the temple in San Francisco, which used to be a place for storing coal. So it's not like this was a fantastic situation. Of course, it had been cleaned. But they were there, they were together. And the ladies were kind of all spread out unless you were married. So like myself, Mukunda, and Janaki, Guridas, and Jamuna, we had our places to live. But the other ladies were here and there. And that meant, they weren't always available at the same time. And there was also a lot of money being spent. Whereas if you could have one place together, that would minimize the expenditures, and then all the ladies would be able to work more closely. So she presented that to Srila Prabhupada, and he gave his blessings. Then later she wanted to go to, she started translating the Gita into Spanish. That was part of her. She was part Native American, part Mexican, part, mongrel American, where you just don't know what you are. And she starts to translate, and then she's thinking, go to Mexico and open a temple. So she went to Prabhupada and she asked, and he actually said yes. But then he thought, no, wait, what about the women? If you leave, they won't have a leader. Better you wait for some time. So, Prabhupada's beautiful concern. The first translation of his books into Italian were by Ali Krishna Devidasi, a young female devotee who to this day is still active in the same field. And she also acted as an interpreter during large public events. There's pictures of her there. Because she had a good memory, she had a good grasp of the philosophy, and she spoke good English. And so she did that. And then later on, her husband became head of the BBT in Europe, and so together they were pushing on Prabhupada's movement through his books. And her husband became a GBC person, and he also became a guru. So Jyotirmayi Devidasi was Srila Prabhupada's preferred interpreter for big events and private meetings with well-known officials because of her language skill and understanding of the philosophy. This was in France. And then he appointed her as the head mistress of the French Gurukul in Novel Mayapur. My daughter attended that school when Jyotirmayi was there after the Dallas school no longer functioned. Manoram from the youth ministry and the bus tour was also there. And Ravinda Sarup's daughter, she was also one of her classmates. And they got a good education. My daughter went to college at the age of 15 on a Gurukul education and graduated at 19. So sometimes statements or generalizations are guidelines meant to give an informed direction. Generalizations, by definition, are inferred from specific cases and they're not meant to be applied indiscriminately. Whereas universal statements such as, we're spirit, soul, we're not this body, they're always true in every circumstance. Another example is Srila Prabhupada's merciful interaction with his spiritual daughters. I'll give two. Cornerstone laying ceremony in Mayapur. So we had been there for the first large event in Mayapur, 1972, and there was no development yet. When we arrived, all you could see was like fields of rice paddy. And there was no service station, there was no chaiwalas, there was no shops at all. Just the road, and it wasn't paved. But Prabhupada had a vision which none of us could grasp. And he invited all his godbrothers to come to this cornerstone laying ceremony. Now his godbrothers had been somewhat critical. Swami Maharaj went to America and he's associating with the Malachas. That's what they thought. And so we're there, and a few of them actually came, not all of them, but a few of them came. So they're sitting there, their elderly godbrothers, and our own youthful budding sannyasas were there. And we're all thinking, because we knew he was going to ask somebody to speak. That was what he would do. So we're all thinking, who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? And he asked me to speak in front of these elderly godbrothers and our as I mentioned, budding sannyasis. So I just spoke about Srila Prabhupada, because that was the person who brought us all together and brought us there. And after I was done, Gargamuni Swami at the time came up and he goes, "That was very nice." And then I realized why he asked me, because, even though they knew verses and shlokas, they were still so young that they didn't have deep realizations. And so it could look a little impertinent in front of these very senior, elderly, saintly Vaishnavas. But he knew I wouldn't go that direction, so that was his choice. And then Srimati Devi Dasi directly assisted Srila Prabhupada in a Juhu cornerstone ceremony. You see this picture of them right there, head to head, shoulder to shoulder. And Nantasesha had just been installed, she's passing things down. So Srila Prabhupada was not shy about engaging his daughters. Now some other challenging statements. Generally, all women desire material enjoyment. They are called less intelligent because they're mostly prone to material enjoyment. So this is right from a purport 323.54. So this is a generalization. I just explained generalization. A generalization is not a universal statement that is to be described indiscriminately or weaponized, especially against women. And Srila Prabhupada knew that tendency, that the young men would sometimes get one of these statements and try to use it to their advantage against women. Here's how Prabhupada would see things. So, Prabhupada spoke, and he said, both of them are very intelligent. And Nandarani is more intelligent than her husband. And then he laughed. He says, I know that. And Atreya Rishi, I find that he is very intelligent, Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada goes, Dayananda. He's intelligent, but Nandarani is still more intelligent. And he laughed again. Both of them are intelligent, but this girl appears to be more intelligent. So this is a room conversation in 76 in New York. And then there was another incident. Aniruddha was the son of Pradyumna and Arundhati. And Pradyumna, which was Prabhupada's Sanskrit scholar, Prabhupada affectionately called him Pantaji. So one of the devotees said, Aniruddha is intelligent like his father, like Pradyumna. And Prabhupada countered, no, intelligent like mother. Arundhati is more intelligent. So to understand the women are less intelligent statement, we have to consider what intelligence means in this or other contexts. Like in Sanskrit, there are several words that translate as intelligence. It means in this or other contexts. So one such word is buddhi, which refers to the ability to analyze, to judge, or discern. Another is metta. Metta, in the 10th chapter of the Gita, is listed by Krishna among 7 feminine qualities. And it means mental vigor, wisdom. So in the purport, Prabhupada writes, the ability not only to read many books on different subject matters, but to understand them and apply them when necessary is intelligence, metta. Another opulence. So these are broad classifications as buddhi, the analytical intelligence, metta, the nourishing and practical intelligence. And the Lord is so kind. He doesn't show special favor only to one who is a great philosopher. He knows the sincerity of purpose. And for this reason, generally women assemble in greater numbers in religious functions. This is part of a purport. In every country, in every sect of religion, it appears women are more interested than the men. We see in China, it's actually incredible, in China, it's all women. And they're powerful women. In China, it's a very difficult place. You just can't go and be out front there. And yet, due to the women, they have made fantastic headways. You can't print books in China without the permission from the government, which means they're going to look through that book tooth and comb. But the women have managed to get the government to print the Srimad Bhagavatam under a cultural label. There's so many wonderful things that they've done. So both men and women have the buddhi and meta types of intelligence. It's a matter of degrees in both. So we need to avoid jumping to conclusions about a person or a group of people based on what body they're wearing around their intelligence. So one of the beauties of Krishna consciousness is that it sees past all bodily and mental differences. It sees to a higher spiritual truth. And when we become devotees, we transcend all designations. And thus Krishna consciousness can unite people, whatever their race, religion, nationality, age, or gender is. The Hare Krishna movement is meant to be at the forefront of implementing equal vision. There's no clock here, so I think.
12:40.
So, what time am I supposed to cut off? Huh? Okay. I thought it was less than that, so we're okay. So the Hare Krishna movement is meant to be at the forefront of implementing equal vision. So now we can move on to what many consider a very heavy, discriminating statement. Janaka Pandit, often quoted by Srila Prabhupada. Never place your faith in a woman or a politician. Of course, Prabhupada didn't say it with that type of emphasis. And Jamuna Devi Dasi remembered 4 occasions when she was present when Prabhupada made that quote. And the last one, he looked her in the eye. It was in Bombay of 73. And he quoted that. And he laughed, he started laughing, a big Prabhupada laugh in front of a small group of men. And then he looks at Jamuna. What do you think, Jamuna? And immediately she retorted, of course it's true, Srila Prabhupada. Whereupon he became very grave, and he looked at her with great feeling, saying, but you are not a woman, you are a Vaisnavi. Srila Prabhupada's consistent goal is to help us transcend all material designations. He wants to see each one of us advance spiritually. Women, Sudras, Vaishyas are all ordinarily regarded as less intelligent. But if one takes to Krishna consciousness, then one is most intelligent. He notes in the teachings of Queen Kunti, chapter 3, although Kunti had the body of a woman, she was a devotee. Therefore, she was not an ordinary, unintelligent woman. Rather, she was the most intelligent because she recognized Krishna to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And from Krishna's viewpoint, unless and until we're elevated to spiritual consciousness, we're conditioned, we're fallen. And from that point of view, those of us who are spiritually inclined are more intelligent than those who aren't. And on the spiritual platform, everyone is equal. Krishna doesn't disintegrate. I wanted to kind of go back to the never place your faith in a woman or a politician statement. Again, knowing context is really important. So this goes back like, yugas. And at that time, Chanakapanda, he wasn't a politician, he wasn't a court jester either, but he was a member of the court. He had easy access to the king. And during that time, sometimes a subversive element would send in a woman to seduce a man who they wanted to bring down. And this woman would be very young and very beautiful, and she would have been trained to take poison little by little until she became herself poisonous. And then they'd send this beautiful young poisonous woman into whoever was supposed to be the target. The what? And, she would try to seduce him. And when they would get into some kind of close situation, naturally there would be some, kissing, which involved an exchange of saliva, and boop, the guy would die. So thus, never trust a woman or a politician. That is kind of like the background there. But it has become taken, especially by enthusiastic young people in this kind of a certain period, never trust a woman, period, and there was no context. So there were quite a few situations that came out as a result of that misunderstanding. Srila Prabhupada was not a warm, fuzzy guru who offered alluring cliches about the light, the force, energy, the divine, this or that. And Krishna is neither such a god. Krishna and his devotees use strong words to classify materialists. Bhagavatam, men who were like hogs, dogs, camels, and asses. Like that's a mantra unto itself. I mean, who here hasn't heard that one? Hogs, dogs, camels, and asses. Those type of persons praise men who never listen to the transcendental pastimes of Lord Krishna, the deliverer of evil. And classifying groups of people serves as a way we and others can understand our conditioned predicament. We can start to transcend our conditioning through purification and get an indication of where we are on Krishna's all-encompassing map and how we can move forward to achieve our desired destination. Everyone in the material world is somewhere on Krishna's map, and every place on that map for the conditioned soul there's assets and deficits. So for example, the scriptures tell us before we can transcend the modes of material nature, first we have to come to the mode of goodness. And to be in the mode of goodness is advantageous, it's essential in fact. But those in the mode of goodness may become stuck in their material, comfortable, peaceful state, disinterested in spiritual life, or the required tapasya to attain it. And the result is they're unable to free themselves from repeated birth and death. So that's the flip side of the mode of goodness. And of course, we have that experience with the yoga folks, because quite often that is their platform. But being in that platform puts you on a certain level which doesn't allow you transcendence. According to the teachings of Sri Krishna and taught by Srila Prabhupada, everyone, regardless of his or her material designation, has the potential to attain the highest spiritual position, to become a pure devotee. Pure Vaishnavas are beyond all designations and classifications. And in their purest state, they see everyone as beyond all designations and classifications, just like Srila Prabhupada. Actually, the association of such persons is uplifting. Srila Prabhupada said about his female disciples, these women are not ordinary women, they're preachers, they're Vaishnavas. By their association, one becomes a Vaishnava. We had an incident in Calcutta where it was a really uncomfortable situation, the temple at that time. There weren't proper quarters for, the men than the women. So the men were sleeping on the balcony when Prabhupada was, the veranda, sorry, when Prabhupada was present. He had the only proper, like, bedroom, you could say. He had his own bathroom. And that was it. Then there was the, what became the temple room. And then there was a common bathroom. And when Prabhupada was present, we all had to use it, men and women. And the interesting thing was, the women were sleeping up on the roof under mosquito nets. And to get to the roof, you had to walk through this common bathroom. So it had a door on both sides. And inevitably, somebody would either lock the door and forget to unlock it, or they wouldn't lock it at all. And, you'd walk in and it would be very embarrassing. And not only that, being accustomed to having water 24/7, and in that situation the water was on at a very specific time during the day in the morning. And we would forget quite often. The person who was assigned to fill the water would forget to fill the water. That meant there would be no water for anything for the whole entire day till the next day. So awkward situation, definitely. And the poor guys, the poor men were like seeing it somehow or other, it was all our fault that they having this discomforting situation. And they got together and they got a plan how to resolve it. And their plan was get the women out of the temple. Just go somewhere else, go anywhere, but not in the temple. And they decided to tell Prabhupada. Now, on the morning walks, Prabhupada would go out and the men would go with him. And myself, Kosaya, Palika, and Jamuna, when she was there, we'd stay behind in the temple, dress the deities. I'd cook for Prabhupada. Somebody would do Prabhupada's room. We were very busy. But as soon as we heard them return, you knew it because wooden stairs in his cane, you'd hear him come up the stairs. We'd immediately stop and open the door and be waiting for him. So this day, the men had decided, we're going to tell Prabhupada, we have a solution, and the women have to go. So we knew about it. There was you call a rat, when a rat snitches, somebody told us what they were going to tell him. So we were like, what's Prabhupada going to say? What's he going to do? So we heard him coming up the stairs. We opened the door. We're standing there smiling with our folded hands. Prabhupada looks up at us, and he turns back and he looks at the men, and then he looks back at us and he points with his cane. If you associate with these women, you go back to Godhead. So that was like, and then still, so that was the end of the plan, but still the situation was there. Now, we have noticed, how many of you have been to the Calcutta Temple? So you know the pond that's across the street, right? It's still there. We decided, well, actually it was my idea. I'm not taking credit for a great idea, as you will hear. The women we'd take our morning bath there. That should alleviate the other situation. So we were, doing that in the early morning because we'd seen other women do this. That's how we got the idea. Like I saw these women taking bath. So, this went on for a few days. And then one of our well-wishers comes to see Prabhupada and he goes, Prabhupada, your women are bathing with the prostitutes. So those other women were the local ladies of the street. We had no idea. But that was the end of our bathing in the pond. So our mission is to see the Sarve Sukhino Bhavantu, to see everyone happy. This was part of a wedding lecture in LA. So everyone happy. We don't want to just see that we exploit someone else and become happy. Only I become happy. No, we want to see everyone happy. But they don't know how to become happy. And therefore, we're trying to spread this Krishna consciousness movement so that everyone can be happy. This is Prabhupada's vision. And our mission is to facilitate them. Krishna consciousness means facilitating all devotees so that they can remain enthusiastic and determined to grow to their full potential. And Srila Prabhupada offered us such facility. And his followers, all of us are meant, and this means everyone, you're a follower of Prabhupada. So we're meant to offer the same Krishna conscious facilities to others. And protection in Krishna consciousness is ultimately meant to help one advance spiritually. And the protection of Krishna is that you're perpetually protected. You don't get any more material body. This is real protection. And this Prabhupada mentioned on a morning walk in LA. So to serve in the association of Krishna's sincere devotees is a form of protection. I mean, I get it. Sometimes you can get really annoyed and agitated by somebody, whether male, female, whatever. It happens due to our unfortunate false ego. But at the same time, being in association of devotees is a protection. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that he'd rather be in this association of a fallen devotee than a polished cat and dog, which is how he would refer to so-called educated persons. Because even a fallen devotee will remind you of Krishna. One God's sister, before she became a devotee, was working in a candy shop in Cleveland. And this fellow came in, and they kind of got to talking, and he'd come back by every day or so, buy some sweets, and they'd be talking. And one day she said to him, I just think there's something I need to know. I should be learning something, but I don't know what it is. And he pulls out a book, and he said, I'll give you this book if you promise to read it. So he gave her one of Prabhupada's books. And she said, I promise. And she opens it up and she sees the beautiful picture of Srila Prabhupada. And she was just overwhelmed. She said this was the most beautiful person she'd ever seen. And she took the picture out of the book and she kept it with her at all times. So she began her protection by the presence and her appreciation of Srila Prabhupada. So protection ultimately means, as far as possible, we remove the physical, mental, emotional obstacles to another person's spiritual progress, and to facilitate and encourage devotional service, however that service takes place. So Srila Prabhupada protected us, his daughters, by educating us about our true identities as spirit souls. Of course, that was for everyone. But he engaged us in devotional service, a process by which we could attain liberation from birth and death, the ultimate protection. And women are one of the 5 groups in a traditional Vedic society that require protection. Like earlier today, we were hearing about the Varnashram Dharma. So, such protection means acknowledging and value. We protect what we know is valuable. And before the age of Kali, Brahmanas, the cows, the women, the children, and all old men, they were all given proper protection. Again, Bhagavatam, purport 185. So the protection of the Brahmana maintains Varnashram, the most scientific culture for attainment of spiritual life. And the protection of cows maintains the most miraculous form of food, milk, for maintaining the brain. The protection of women means our chastity, by which we get good children for peace and progress in spiritual-oriented life. And the protection of children means it will give them a human form of life, meaning a chance to prepare them for liberty from material bondage. One time, one devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, Labangalika, she came with a young son. And this young son was a very delightful young man. And Srila Prabhupada initiated him actually at a young age, between 11 and 12. Got first and second initiation, and he was named Dorkadish Das. And Prabhupada would call him Mr. DDD. So the mom was wondering, what is my duty? But she kind of was meaning in a broader way. And he looked at her and he said, your duty is to see that your son never takes birth again. So this is a instruction of what it means to be a parent, The protection of old men gives them a chance to prepare themselves for life after death. It gives them a chance to just put down all the other stuff and focus on Krishna. And the child must be taken care of. That's good. So similarly, women also, just like old men, Prabhupada, just like old men like me, I'm always taken care of. That is civilization. That is human society. It was from a lecture in '73 in San Francisco. So here Prabhupada gave himself as an example of a protected person. Clearly, that one is protected does not mean that one is unable to fully utilize his or her propensities in Krishna service. It's not that because women need protection that they cannot speak or sing or manage or lead or give classes or do any other thing that we're inclined to do. Just as protecting old men did not limit the activities of Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada gave his female followers responsible services. Pujaris, head pujaris, preachers, book distributors, art department heads, artists, headmistresses, teachers, proofreaders, BBT staff, kitchen heads, cooks, and in a number of areas, he gave women protection through engagement. And he based his appointments on qualification, not their gender, not our gender. He told Mahaguna, a wonderful god sister from Japan, so he met her in Japan, and he said, you should become the temple president in Japan. But she ended up getting married to an American. Then now he is the guru, and he preaches widely in Japan. But Prabhupada had that vision. Sometimes you hear, well, Prabhupada didn't make a woman a GBC, Prabhupada didn't make a... Just think for a moment, back when all that started, most of us were still young and we had kids. We had an engagement already that couldn't be compromised. So he didn't do certain things at certain times. It doesn't mean they couldn't be done. Prabhupada said, my godbrothers criticize me that I have allowed women to live in our temples. But I have become successful because I have made this adjustment. And that was from a room conversation in 1973. Okay, so 2 minutes to 1. So thank you very much for... And thank you very much for being here and allowing me to share some different observations based on Srila Prabhupada's teachings, his example, and Shastra.
Thank you very much.